Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Batu, and today we're going to talk about long-run cost curve and how to derive this long-run cost curve. So the long-run cost curve comes from the short-run cost curves. So let's look at a particular short-run average total cost curve. So I will call this short-run average total cost curve 1. So what do we mean by this curve? So this curve tells us that, okay, for this particular technology or plant size, as the textbook calls it, you have an associated average total cost curve for this plant size. And for this plant size, the lowest cost is achieved at, let's say, at Q1. Now, if I'm a firm and say I would want to expand production, then I can expand my plant size. If I expand my plant size, then I will have a new short-run average total cost curve. It can go this way or it can go this way. Let's assume that this short-run average total cost curve will shift from here to here. And I will call this guy short-run average total cost curve 2. Now, this SRATC2 gives us Q2, where Q2 gives you the lowest possible short-run average total cost curve for this plant size. And we can repeat the same exercise throughout by increasing the plant size. So let's have another one right here. I will call this short-run average total cost curve 3. And again, this gives us a Q, let's call this Q3. And what they notice is this: as we increase our plant size from here to there, what happens to our short-run average total cost is that at the optimal level of output for each associated plant size, our cost starts to decrease. So what explains that reduction in cost? Well, it is possible that as the firm increases its production, it's becoming better in producing the good. And that's what we mean by increasing returns. As the firm starts to use more inputs, have a bigger plant size, it can produce more of the good, as shown here from Q1 to Q3. And at the same time, it can achieve a lower cost. Let's say from here to there. You see that if I'm going to plot cost here, let's say I call this C1, the cost starts to decrease from C1 to C2 and eventually all the way here to C3. Okay, so cost decreases. Now it's also possible that, let's say if the firm decides to produce more, okay, beyond Q3, then cost may start to go up. So our SRATC4, let's say if the firm would decide to increase its plant size beyond SRATC3, okay, so let's call this SRATC4. Now what you see is that costs start to increase. And I will call this guy our C4. Okay? Now, what could explain this increase in cost? Well, what happens is that it could be that the plant size or the firm has become so large that it has become costly to manage. So costs start to increase, and eventually it will, let's have another one here, SRATC5, and the cost is also higher than in SRATC4, and I will call this guy our C5. Now, question for is this, like, hey, we're talking about long-run average cost. Where is the long-run average cost in this graph? Well, the long-run average cost curve is an envelope of all of these short-run average total cost curves. So what do we mean by envelope? So it's going to be like this. If we connect all of these low points for each of these SRATC curves, then we will have what we call the long-run average cost curve. And now, let me add something here, my friends. So we see here that Q3, you have the lowest possible cost, right? Now, this Q3 is what we call, this is when the firm achieves what we call constant costs. Or in other words, we call it constant returns. So constant returns means if the firm uses a certain amount of input, the firm can achieve the same amount of output in terms of, so let me restate it again. So constant returns means if the firm use, let's say, a specific amount of labor, so the firm increase its labor production by a certain amount, output will increase by the same amount. That's why it's called constant returns. So from here, all the way here, we have what we call decreasing costs. As you can see, costs decrease from SRATC1 to SRATC3 because the firm is experiencing increasing returns. And from Q3 onwards, we see that cost starts to increase. So we have here increasing costs. And what happens is that the firm experiences decreasing returns. And that concludes our video on deriving the long-run average cost curve. And I hope you learned something.